Greetings, my dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Reading Epic Threads. I'm your host, Patrick Gunnels, joining you from Spring, Texas. This September 23rd at 2024, September 23rd, 2024 at 9:57 a.m. Central Daylight Time. I bring to you one piece today from Dawn Billie, and that would be Welcome to the Bay, Part 2. Without further ado, let us begin. From dawnbillie.substack.com. Welcome to the Bay, Part 2. Welcome back. Part 1 covered the history of the Bay, Obama's plan to close it, Trump's plan to keep it open, an overview of the camps, and the substantial amount of money awarded for contracts to renovate an area that we've been told has a decreasing population. The papers that I write usually start with a gut feeling that pushes me to research it until I can confirm or deny my ideas. After finishing a paper, I check the Q drops to find any that may validate my thoughts. It's exciting when I find that validation. If you are still resistant to the Q-op based on false QAnon stories generated by the Mockingbird media, I urge you to reconsider. These drops were published gradually over many years, and they are now falling into place. The phrase, future proves past, appears in 51 Q drops, confirming that we were being shown information that is now materializing. Below is the Q confirmation of the theory laid out in the Bay. Q drop number 740 of February 11th, 2018. Question from an Anon. Don't care about your sentence structure. Just care to know how full Gitmo is gonna be. Response. Max cap. 1. Other prison being prepped. Q. From part 1 of this series. Quote, in February 2018, the Pentagon requested $69 million to replace the top secret Camp 7 prison with a proposed completion date of July 2022. End quote. Is this confirmation that Camp 7 was replaced? Q drop number 2623. Anon asks, is Gitmo going to be used for U.S. citizens? Cabal? Answer from Q. 3 detention centers being prepped. Monitor funding. Q. This drop mentions that 3 detention centers were being prepared for something and recommends we monitor funding. Below is a portion of the table I created that contains a summary of contracts awarded by the Department of Defense. In September 2018, there was a combined total of $410 million for construction and repair services. Is this confirmation that these contracts were used for the 3 detention centers? Q drop number 3538 of July 29th, 2019. Pictured here. We are Q. 3 Anons, each with a Pepe picture in front of his face and consecutive words of "We are here." This is in front of the sign that says "Welcome to U.S. Naval Station Guantanamo Bay, Cuba." Commanding Officer Captain John A. Fisher, welcome aboard. We now have plenty of space. Q. Welcome to the Bay, Part 2. Some major changes started taking place at the Bay right at the time the pandemic was picking up speed. The first case of COVID-19 was confirmed at the Navy base on March 24th, 2020, in a sailor who was not involved with the prisoners. Remember, the Navy base and the prison are not in the same area. The prison is actually about 3.5 miles from the Navy base as the crow flies, and the terrain looks very rugged. Below is a Google Earth image of the area. The Navy base is circled in green, the prison circled in red. For those of you just listening, almost like they're opposite sides of an island. Opposite coasts. After the confirmed COVID case, the Navy base shut down most activities, closing the gym, church, and cinemas. and converted the restaurants and dining rooms to takeout service. Anyone arriving at the base was required to quarantine for 2 weeks. Social distancing and mask wearing were taking place at the Navy base, just as it was back in the States. Prisoners were not being tested at that time because they didn't meet the criteria set by the CDC. The number of military members allowed near the prisoners was reduced due to travel restrictions and restrictions on direct contact. Lawyers planned to video chat with the 5 defendants on trial. Access to the prison at the Bay was restricted even further. The COVID restrictions taking place at the Bay began just a month prior to the Navy ships departing New York and California, as mentioned in the War of 2020. Were the COVID restrictions used as cover to allow for the preparation of top secret arrival? The Bay's changes to media access. The media began reporting on changes to access at the base even before the pandemic, in fact. Less than 100 hours after President Trump issued the executive order revoking Obama's executive order to close the prison, a group of journalists set out on a tour of the Bay. Before they arrived, they were given a document containing new conditions surrounding their visit that replaced the old rules. In the past, journalists were shown artwork created by the prisoners, but in late 2017, the Pentagon declared the artwork to be government property, so it was removed from the journalists' tour. This makes sense. When you consider the changes that were taking place at the prison, I imagine the risk of a prisoner illustrating those changes in their artwork and a journalist noticing it would be too great. The journalists were no longer offered a taste of food from the kitchen, only the opportunity to take photos of it. The formerly relaxed, casual press briefings were replaced with stiff military personnel, limiting the amount of information they provided. The tone of the article paints a picture of an atmosphere much less friendly and forthcoming than the journalists were used to. Let me make sure I got this. From the Miami Herald. Maybe we should read this article. If I can pull up the Miami Herald article. All right, this is from February 12th, 2018. I'm going to read the article to you. From the Miami Herald, Making Guantanamo Great Again, the Prison's Media Makeover by Carol Rosenberg. Updated February 12th, 2018 at 6:25 a.m. Inside a vacant former maximum security prison, the Pentagon has nearly finished building a new health clinic with nearby surgical and radiological suites. Soon, contractors will add furniture, equipment, and put a padded cell in the facility's psych unit. At the adjacent prison, the military has transformed Bravo Block into a recreation site. Guards move 7 shackled captives there, one at a time, then remove their restraints to let them mingle for 4 hours. There are stacks of books to browse, rugs for prayer, an exercise bike, ping pong table, and video game devices. The soccer video game FIFA 2018 is particularly popular now. An Army lieutenant told journalists being shown around the block in Camp 6, a prison where the Pentagon keeps 24 of Guantanamo's 41 war on terror captives. It is a Saturday, less than 100 hours after President Donald J. Trump has canceled his predecessor's closure order. In the State of the Union, he's asked Congress to make sure, quote, we continue to have all necessary power to detain terrorists wherever we chase them down, wherever we find them, and in many cases for them. It will now be Guantanamo Bay, end quote. Prison commanders have been saying for months now that the troops are trained and ready to take new prisoners, but the man in charge, Rear Admiral Edward Cashman, makes clear that on this day he's still waiting for the Pentagon to transform the commander-in-chief's policy guidance into military operational orders, and he's received none. Meantime, the prison is showcasing recent consolidations and current facilities, and although conversations with guards among the 1,700-member prison staff are excluded, prison spokeswoman Navy Commander Anne Leanos confirms that they execute their mission flawlessly. Call it the Make Guantanamo Great Again media tour. Significant changes. The prison staff is looking forward, and gone are the basic opportunities that shaped earlier media visits. Detainee art is no longer on display after the Pentagon declared the captives' artwork U.S. government property and halted releases to the public. News crews can no longer observe or film the rituals of Muslim prayer in the cell block, a time when the captives lay out their rugs, unaware that on the other side of one-way glass, troops are tiptoeing in their combat boots to keep quiet. Commanders wrap up a half-day visit to the detention center zone with a stiff podium press conference across the base at Camp Justice, the war court compound. These people declared war on the United States. They are law of armed conflict detainees, the admiral told reporters February 3rd. Cashman casts it as wrong to say people are being held indefinitely without trial. The assertion is not that these people are criminals. To his right, his Guard Force commander appeared to stand at parade rest, an Army posture in a sharp contrast to past press encounters when Army Colonel Steve Grabovich patiently took questions around a conference table. This time, the men are standing in a shed built for press conferences with lawyers of the military commissions, the war court, where 10 of Guantanamo's 41 captives have been charged with war crimes. 2 are already convicted. So, Cashman's remarks are an apparent reference to the 26 captives known as Guantanamo's forever prisoners, men held under the law of war as too dangerous to release but not charged with crimes. No mention is made of the 5 captives who were long ago approved for release or resettlement by Bush or Obama administration review boards, so long as the Department of State can negotiate security assurances. Typically, detention and judicial systems are separate, so much so that Pentagon policy separates media opportunities between trips to cover the court and trips to ask questions about detention operations. Now, troops have hung the prison logo at the war court press room, far removed from the sprawling detention center zone of hundreds of empty cells surrounded by barbed wire and fencing the reporters have come to report about. Limited information. There are 1,700 troops and contractors responsible for the 41 War on Terror captives. But under rules promulgated by White House Chief of Staff John Kelly when he was the Marine general with oversight of Guantanamo, only a few troops can talk to reporters in a program that continues to shrink considerably. Old, empty, open-air facilities are off limits, with the once showcase prisoner of war style camp destined for demolition. Doctors no longer assure that none of the captives are in critical condition. Censorship has hardened, as have the talking points. Reporters are still shown the kitchen where Filipino laborers prepare a series of different meals for the detainees depending on their dietary needs. On this day, lunch for the meat eaters is to be beef stroganoff. They can photograph it, but are no longer offered a taste. Questions about hunger striking are dealt with briefly and dismissively. Some of them will enter all feed occasionally, an Army Master Sergeant says at the meal preparation site. Enter all feed. Force feeding, I think is what that means. Later, a Navy doctor briefing reporters on healthcare says no captive currently requires a daily tube feeding to maintain a safe body weight. Cashman said, despite claims of hunger strikes in news reports and legal filings, we see them eating on a regular basis. He said the captives tell his staff they're not on hunger strike, but have been advised or feel they need to maintain an abnormally low body weight to benefit them in future legal proceedings. On the tube feedings, he said, feeding via nasal gastric tube is not a punishment. It's a medical procedure. During the tour, an anonymous Navy doctor describes the medical care as excellent, on par with that of U.S. forces stationed here when practicable. But unlike during past visits, he declines to answer a question on whether any detainee is in critical condition. It's a puzzlement until the Herald learns that a visiting neurosurgeon conducted orthopedic surgery on a former CIA prisoner from Malaysia. New media rules. Days before the media arrived, the prison issued a new contract of conditions of access that, for the prison at least, replaced old ground rules negotiated between the Pentagon, news media executives, and First Amendment attorneys. The new ground rules define, quote, protected information as sensitive but unclassified information about friendly intentions, capabilities, and activities needed by adversaries to plan and act effectively against friendly mission accomplishment. This was the first media visit inside the prison for reporters from 3 news organizations, Australian and Colombian television, as well as National Public Radio, and reporters said afterward they felt as though they were cut off or scolded for asking questions. At one point, as Army escorts watch without comment, a Miami Herald reporter snaps photos of a sign on the door of a room for International Red Cross phone calls later. The public affairs officer scolds the reporter that at that time and in that place, photography was not allowed. It appears your conduct is that you choose not to listen, Llanos said. She later ordered the reporter to delete the phone room photo, so she did. Colombian television personality Maria Elvira Arango of Caracol TV said by email afterward that she felt she could ask anything, but, quote, they shared with us the truth that they wanted to share with us, not all the truth, end quote. Asked whether she thought the people she met were proud of their prison, she replied, they were proud of their job. In the prison zone, reporters saw foreign laborers repaving a road between the current prisons for low-value detainees and the now abandoned first prisoner of war-style camp, which Cashman has slated for demolition. And a new mission motto. During the visit of a few hours, construction equipment blocked what had been a stock photo opportunity. A string of cement pylons at the sector entrance painted with the words "Honor Bound," not so long ago described by a soldier escorting the media around as the mortar that holds together the Army's values. The prison's mission statement has also undergone a makeover. From the Bush administration on, commanders declared the prison committed to, quote, safe, humane, legal, and transparent care and custody of detained enemy combatants. Since Trump took office, the words legal and transparent have vanished. The prison's masthead has changed too. The expression safe, humane, legal, transparent has been replaced by the Bush-era motto, honor bound to defend freedom. On a ride into the prison zone, a guard saluted a minivan carrying reporters riding past a demolished campground, Camp Iguana, and declared, honor bound. Llanos replied, defend freedom. Going back to the piece, Welcome to the Bay. During his oversight of Southcom, John Kelly allowed the media access to only a few members of the military at the Bay. Over time, that access continued to shrink. Censorship has hardened, as have the talking points. When journalists from 3 news organizations attended their first media tour, they said they felt they were cut off or scolded for asking questions. This was in February of 2018. By that time, the media had been branded as the enemy of the people by President Trump. In Making Guantanamo Great Again, the prison's media makeover, this journalist also discusses changes to the tour. The prison's mission statement was changed from safe, humane, legal, transparent care to safe, humane care and custody. The words legal and transparent had been removed. In addition, the banner over the prison was changed from safe, humane, legal, and transparent to honor bound to defend freedom. In the 2018 NPR article, on a tense press tour of Guantanamo's prison complex, Signs of Expansion, the journalist says she was given a new media agreement to sign. In the past, her access was covered by a 2010 agreement from the Pentagon that had received input from First Amendment lawyers and executives from news organizations. This new agreement had no known input and was a sign it or no tour document with press restrictions, unlike anything she'd seen before at the Bay. In addition, a new rule concerning photos and videos was something she, quote, might sooner have expected to find in communist-controlled Cuba. The new rule was that imagery was considered property of the U.S. government until it was screened and approved for release. The military was censoring journalists' photos and prohibiting them from taking pictures with their smartphones. The censorship continued, and the media was not pleased by it. In August 2023, The Intercept printed, "Censorship has never been worse at Guantanamo Bay." The censorship began as soon as they boarded the flight to Cuba, when the journalists were instructed not to take photographs from the tarmac or the plane while heading to the bay. During the visit, anything of photojournalistic value was off limits. The media was to focus only on the military commission proceedings for the terrorist detainees at Camp Justice, which was described as, quote, "a very large, very cold, and very classified courtroom constructed to deal with the few remaining detainees." As recently as 2018, the media had been allowed into the prison. Now, in 2023, they weren't allowed anywhere close to it. Journalists were no longer allowed to photograph the old outdoor prison camp X-ray, and all locations related to the detention site were off limits. Quote, "Denying any new visual documentation of the defunct former facility seemed egregious and irrational." Just like the complaints in 2018, this journalist also complained that the constant monitoring and pre-screening of her images had been invasive. She never did get to see the prison. Can Americans be held at the Bay? The rules surrounding the U.S. government's right to hold American citizens at the Bay was a murky subject for me that took a lot of digging. I can now confidently say that the answer is yes, if they are considered to be enemy combatants. An enemy combatant is defined as someone who engages in hostilities for the other side during armed conflict. The Bush administration created the legal status for enemy combatants that allowed the military to detain them indefinitely and without charge. Congress adopted the authorization for use of military force on September 18, 2001, authorizing the use of the military against those responsible for the September 11th attacks. The authorization granted the president the authority to use all necessary force against those who he determined were involved in the 9/11 attacks. Since then, presidents have interpreted their authority to extend beyond the 9/11 terrorists to apply it to other groups, since the law doesn't state a specific area of operation. The full list of groups that the U.S. military is fighting or believes it is authorized to fight is classified. However, President Trump made us aware of one such group when he tweeted that Antifa would be designated as a terrorist organization. Donald J. Trump on Twitter, May 31st, 2020, the United States of America will be designating Antifa as a terrorist organization. According to a Congressional Research Service report to Congress, existing law provides the authority to detain American citizens who are suspected of being members of terrorist organizations as enemy combatants. If you were like me and watched every day of the circus that was the confirmation hearings of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, there were certain conversations that were particularly memorable. Near the end of the dialogue between Senator Lindsey Graham and Brett Kavanaugh, Senator Graham begins the following line of questioning.
The law. If an American citizen goes to Afghanistan and takes up the fight against our forces, and they're captured in Afghanistan, the current law is you can be held as an enemy combatant in spite of your citizenship. Is that correct? Is that the Hamdi decision?
That's what the Supreme Court said in the Hamdi decision with appropriate due process findings.
Absolutely. Appropriate due process findings. Here's what I want people in your business to think about. Are you aware of the fact that the radical Islamic groups are trying to recruit Americans to their cause? That they're over the internet trying to get Americans to take up jihad?
Yes.
The likelihood of an American citizen joining their cause is real because it's happened in the past. The likelihood of it happening in the future, I think, is highly likely. If an American citizen attacking the embassy in Kabul can be held as an American citizen, here's the question. Can an American citizen collaborating with other terrorists who are not American citizens be held as an enemy combatant for attacking the Capitol? And if they can't, you're incentivizing the enemy to find an American citizen because they have a privilege that no other terrorist would have. So you said something was very compelling to me. that you apply the law and you have to understand how it affects people, right?
Yes, sir.
I hope you will understand that this war is not over, that the war is coming back to our shores. It's just a matter of time before they hit us again, because we have to be right all the time, and they have to be right one time. I hope we don't create a process where if you can come to America, you get a special deal. Makes it harder for us to deal with you and find out what you know. We treat you as a common criminal versus the warrior you've become. That's just my parting thought to you. And you'll decide the way you think is best for the country.
I had to replay this clip several times to understand exactly what Senator Graham was saying. My interpretation is, if you are an American who attacks the embassy in Kabul, you are still considered an American citizen and are awarded certain protections. On the contrary, if you are an American citizen and work with other terrorists to attack our capital, you lose those protections and are now considered an enemy combatant. Senator Graham wanted to make sure Brett Kavanaugh understood this interpretation, and he clearly did. It's notable that Senator Graham used attacking the Capitol as an example when this hearing was held in September 2018, 2 years before the J6 insurrection that wasn't. American citizens acting as enemy combatants can be held under the authorization for use of military force, just as any other terrorist can. The question is, are the enemy combatants from our government, Hollywood, and media currently detained at the Bay? Leaving the Bay. President Trump's 2018 Executive Order 13823, protecting America through lawful detention of terrorists, states that additional detainees can be added to the Bay when necessary to protect the nation. It also states that any detainee transferred after January 30th, 2018 is subject to the periodic review established in Executive Order 13567 to determine whether continued detention is necessary to protect the security of the United States. American citizens, when acting as enemy combatants, can be transferred to the Bay and detained there and will be offered a review to determine their continued threat to America. Is this why some people were missing or out of the public eye for a while, but have now reappeared with a new attitude? Were they detained and questioned as to whether they were actually enemies of the country or just arrogant, power-hungry, ignorant pawns who weren't a significant part of the plan to overthrow the government? Chris Cuomo comes to mind. It's looking more likely that those who we long suspected of treason are no longer a threat and are probably residing at the Bay. What's next? The research for this paper led me down another path that shook me to my core. It's led me to develop another theory of what will be a profound moment in our country's future that will prove to be historic. My next paper will tie all of this together, but I'd like to provide a preview. On September 18th, I posted the following comment into the abyss on X. Real Dawn Billie on Twitter. Give her a follow. Admitting I'm wrong has never been a problem for me. I've become an expert in it over the past 8 years. Lol. In Welcome to the Bay Part 1, I mentioned the $99 million contract for translation, transcription, and interpretation services, where I focused on transcription services. Last night, while watching the 1961 movie Judgment at Nuremberg, I had a change of heart when I saw the US, UK, French, and Russians in the Palace of Justice put headsets on for translation during the trials. See where this is going? Think bigger. Think bigger. And that's the latest, my dear friends. Don't forget to go to epicminerals.net for a little bit of protection against all the poisons of this world.
He said something that really hit home about this phenomena of chemtrails.
Manganese will make you kill your mama. How much manganese are you spraying in my neighborhood at night while I'm asleep?
Military and some commercial jets have been fitted with huge barrels of at least 49 different kinds of documented chemical poisons. Barium is toxic to all mammals. Aluminum is known to diminish kidney function and destroy brain cells and cognitive function. A problem, a serious problem.
Patent number 5003186 describes cooling the Earth with metal oxides sprayed into the stratosphere.
And I thought, well, geez, this is what I do for a living. I was finding tons and tons of large quantities of aluminum, barium, strontium in the forms of oxides and sulfates. Instead of protecting the people, we are poisoning the people.
Detox and prevent heavy metal poisoning. www.epicminerals.net. Promo code Shapiro. I like the fact that promo code Shapiro has the exact lyrical cadence as Funky, what is it? Funky something Medina? How does it go? Funky Joe Medina? Funky something Medina. Anyway, you could make a promo code Shapiro version of that exact same song. I should have known the actual title of the song. Anyway, great piece by Dawn Billie. Check her out at dawnbillie.substack.com. Can't wait for part 3. Let us pray. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all evil spirits who prowl about the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. I love you all. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you tomorrow.